Hey, good Sunday, everybody, and happy Groundhog Day out there. And Punxsutawney Phil waking up this morning and predicting 6 more weeks of winter. Well, I'm with them. Looking at the latest model data, it looks to be a very active February ahead with multiple winter storms, potentially major winter storms that could impact much of the East. Really through at least the first half of February, potentially even into the second half. So we're going to break all that down for you in today's video. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And if you haven't already, go ahead, like the video, subscribe, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. Also, comment, let me know where you're watching from as we enter this active time period. May even begin to double up on the videos once more and potentially do some live streams this week ahead as we continue to track this active pattern. Also wanted to thank David Poplin, donated to the channel. If you would also like to donate to the channel and you don't want to do it through YouTube, the link for that is in the description of the video and under the banner on the channel. So if you feel so inclined, definitely feel free to do that. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and dive right on into the data here. Don't want to leave you waiting any longer. And what you see next to me, this is the latest run of our European computer model. And I think doing a good job of showing that pattern setting up shop here. Not one, not two, maybe not even three, potentially even more than that, kind of storm systems crossing the country here over just the next about 10 days. This loop is for, you go about 15 days out, it's going to be maybe 4 to 5 storm systems. And I'll tell you, I think these are going to be pretty strong storms. These are not going to be little clippers like we've been dealing with. These will have the potential for a pretty strong wind, heavy precipitation, whether that be snow, ice, or rain. Obviously going to depend on where you're at, but that's what we're going to try to figure out in today's video. And then also you'll notice the track of these get further south and further south as we go ahead into time. And that will be another key component of this forecast that would kind of break down for you in today's video. Now, before we get to all the fun stuff, let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now out there, and you'll kind of notice a couple areas to maybe mention here. We do have one little clipper system. Again, this one not one of the big storms we're watching, but at least noticeable on satellite here. That's going to work through the northeast overnight tonight and drop a quick 1 to 3 inches of snow for some folks. But the bigger story is back out west, where we have had just tremendous amounts of kind of this atmospheric river pushing moisture inland, that being snow and rain, but really a lot of snow as we get back towards this more La Nina-like pattern that we've seen over the past week or so, and this big low pressure parked right offshore of British Columbia, just really enhancing this atmospheric river. That combined with cold air moving south out of Canada, yeah, this is about as good as it gets for snow lovers and ski lovers as well out west. In fact, even Seattle, some of these lower elevations getting in on the snow. Not something to be ignored out there, as you can kind of see that here on our satellite loop. And it also translates pretty well to radar. Let's start zooming in on some areas. Here's the nationwide view. Again, we'll zoom into starting with the Midwest. This is that little clip where I talked about. We've got some snow in Michigan. Let me know how much snow has fallen. I know I've got a good amount of viewers out this way, so definitely let me know. Probably even had maybe a little bit of snow down into the Chicago and South Bend area this morning. Definitely let me know. Again, not a big deal, that one, but we'll talk about it in today's video. And then we go back out towards the west, and this is where once again we have that active atmospheric river, and it's coming with waves. In fact, if I zoom out a little bit, look at the connection this has. Not quite a Pineapple Express. If you don't know what that is, basically that's an atmospheric river that connects all the way back to Hawaii. But this one, not quite getting that far, but still a potent atmospheric river, and continuing to bring plenty of active weather into the West Coast. And that will continue here as we keep on trucking on through this week. Now, current alerts out there, and not a lot right now outside of the West, although again, you look out west, in fact, almost the entire state of Montana under some sort of winter weather advisory or winter storm warning or watch or something in that ballpark, and then a swath of winter weather advisories here through the Dakotas, Minnesota, and portions of Wisconsin for that clipper system, and another clipper system behind it here that's going to be on the way pretty soon. But just to give you an idea of how, I guess, not big of a deal this clipper is, the first one at least, we don't even have any winter weather advisories currently in the Northeast. So not a big deal, nothing you haven't seen before. But like I said, it's notable enough that we will mention it a little bit more here as we zoom into certain areas. But like I said, the big story out west, plenty of winter storm advisories and even some flood advisories there into the San Francisco Bay Area, where it's a little bit more rain than maybe that winter weather. Although you go back towards the Sierra Nevadas and that snowpack building up, which will be good, as that's kind of crucial for California's water supply as we get towards the drier months towards the summer. So that's kind of the current picture. Let's talk about what's to come now down the road out of the near term at least, and then we'll get to the medium term and the long term here in just a moment. But right now, the big setup is this big piece of energy. This is our upper level vorticity map. Showing that low pressure, again, just off the coast of British Columbia that I mentioned earlier. And basically what's happening is little pieces of it are breaking off here, and that's what's becoming these little clippers. In fact, you can kind of see one piece of energy where our current clipper is, see another piece of energy to the north of it there, and then the actual storm system itself kind of rotating through. So that's been the theme for the past couple of days, and that will be the theme up until about Wednesday, and that's when we change from kind of a clipper setup to more of a pronounced storm system kind of setup and multiple of them. So I think we're really getting to the end of this quiet period. By the time we get to about the middle of this week, folks, things are going to go downhill pretty quickly. And that's why we're going to potentially have to double up on some videos and do some live streams and all that stuff to keep you up to date. Definitely something that we're watching. Now, let's zoom into the west a little bit. Let me know if you're watching out here, by the way. I know most of my viewers are in the east, but if you're watching in Oregon, California, Washington, anywhere in the Rockies or just west of kind of the Mississippi in general, let me know. But here we go this afternoon. Plenty of mountain snow, including even places like Seattle. So some more lower elevation snowfall. You can see why Montana has winter storm watches and warnings. A lot of snow on the way this evening and into the overnight. I'm just going to keep on breezing through this. Now, this is tomorrow early morning. This is really more like late tonight for the West Coast. Notice what happens. A little piece of energy beginning to break off here, and we're starting to get some of that snow to break out through the Dakotas and into Minnesota. That's that kind of clipper setup I talked about. So the current clipper that we're dealing with is not going to be the only one. Another one on the way here as we go into kind of tomorrow. But other than that, folks, it just continues. The onslaught of snow and rain all the way here. This gets us all the way to Wednesday afternoon. And you'll notice it's more the same, just a very active pattern out west. And you kind of do the numbers on that and you start crunching it and you think, well, that should be enough for a pretty good amount of snow. And you would be right. If you've got a ski trip planned anytime soon, you are in luck because these slopes out here from British Columbia, especially southward towards the Cascades and the Northern Rockies, absolutely going to get pounded with snow. This is just the next 72 hours. In fact, even the Sierra Nevada is starting to get in on some of those higher totals. We're talking 3-4 feet plus of snow on the highest elevations. Even a place like Seattle has already picked up some snow, could still pick up another couple of inches in the city before the next couple of days end. But either way, a very snowy, active pattern for our friends out west. Now, that leads us into the east here. No the picnic either, but not quite as crazy as what we're seeing out west, at least right now. But like I said, the pattern's going to kind of flip, and the craziness you see out west is going to become the craziness in the east by the time we get a couple days further down the road. Now, the near term today, some light snow in the northeast. This is that clipper system. Probably only a couple of hours of light to moderate snow. Not a huge deal, but a good swath of 1 to 3 inches of snow, including maybe northern New Jersey, New York City, Philadelphia could try to get in on flakes. Less likely to see accumulations there, but you go just north of the cities, then you're going to have a much higher chance of some snow. I think areas through really much of Connecticut, Rhode Island, including up to Boston, through really the entire state of Massachusetts, into New Hampshire, Vermont, and really just about the entire state of Maine as well. Going to be all snow out of this. Shouldn't have to deal with really any mixing. Just kind of a lack of precipitation is the bigger concern, at least if you're a snow lover. Not a whole lot to ring out here. So a 1 to 3 inch event looks pretty likely. Now, after that, this is tomorrow morning, another clipper system. Again, I told you it's these little pieces of energy right now we're dealing with, kind of more of a nuisance than anything, but that's going to bring some snow. You'll see starting into the Dakotas. I'm backing it up a little bit overnight tonight. By tomorrow morning, just north of the Twin Cities into the UP, northern Wisconsin, and then eventually kind of clipping through the northeast a little bit. This is tomorrow evening, Monday evening rather, and a little bit of warm air problems with this one actually. You'll notice it kind of turns into more of a frontal system than a clipper by the time it gets to the northeast, and because of that, you kind of got this warm sector that's building and really not a whole lot of snow out of this one. But on the backside, we'll once again bring a shot of some cooler air. It could get some snow into the northern sections of Maine there, and then into kind of portions of Canada there for our friends in Quebec. Could see some, and then even our friends up in Nova Scotia, even if they did announce they're pulling all of the American alcohol off their shelves. But we won't get into that, and we will keep on with the weather. So Yeah, it's been a week, hasn't it? Let's go ahead and start looking at snowfall totals back out into the Dakotas out of this one, and it could be a good little storm for our folks here, and obviously not a highly populated area, but if you live here, a good 3 to 5 inch snow event right along the state line there, and then you get to areas a little more populated near the Twin Cities. You're on the southern fringe of the snow, so it's going to be a sharp cutoff, but you could still get a quick inch or two out of it, and then you move further eastbound here into Wisconsin, Michigan, and I do think a good swath of snow through the northern half of these states, northern Wisconsin into the UP and then into the northern thumb. This could be a good little 3 to 6 inch snow event. So obviously not a blizzard by any means, not a huge blockbuster storm, but an area that hasn't seen a whole lot of snow this year, especially in Wisconsin. Yeah, this could be notable and enough to obviously make the grass white here as we go through the kind of Monday, Tuesday timeframe, and then the Northeast. Really, it's going to be the first storm, and you'll notice really everyone kind of in that 1 to 3 inch range. A couple areas, obviously in the higher elevations, could luck out, get 3 to 5, 3 to 6 even. But most folks, a nice little light snowfall event here in the Northeast out of this first Clipper system as we keep on going ahead into time. All right, so that's kind of the current Clipper system and what we're dealing with there. Now let's move ahead to the more major snowfall potential. And it's the same setup that we were dealing with, this big upper level low, but what's happening, and you kind of see it back out here towards the PNW, what's happening now though is basically energy and more pronounced energy is getting out in front of it. And you see this big area of just kind of general vorticity or storm energy or whatever you want to call it. This is Wednesday morning. Well, this is going to create a much more pronounced storm system. It's going to create a lot of lift out ahead of it here right along the Ohio Valley. And that combined with the fact that, well, it's still February, we're going to run into some icing concerns and even some snow concerns. So you see this really ramps up by about Wednesday night into Thursday, moving eastbound, and you'll see it on the actual model itself here in a second. That's just storm number one, folks, though. That's kind of the Wednesday, Thursday time frame, maybe even into Friday. And then behind it, another shot of cold air. That brings the cold air further south. And behind it, another piece of energy. Here's the next piece by right around Super Bowl weekend, a week or so from now. You can see this one's also going to cross the country and once again potentially bring what I would consider a pretty significant winter storm here through the Midwest and then into the Northeast. And then after that, we'll take a look in a second, but could, move the storm track even further south. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's go ahead and talk about these first two storm systems. And it's still a little too soon to talk about exact totals, but I am going to give you a little preliminary snowfall potential map here in a moment. We'll take a look at some models, but let's break down what each model shows at this moment in time. This is the GFS model starting Wednesday morning, time right above my head. So 7 a.m. February 5th. You see that there. Basically what's happening is that storm system and kind of a bit of a warm front in here is creating enough lift out in front of it over even some areas that are below freezing for some snow and ice to break out. And you can see that even into Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening here. All rain, I think, for Kentucky, definitely for the Carolinas, Tennessee, but you start getting north towards the Delmarva, the DMV, the Northeast, and then into kind of the Great Lakes region. That's where we're going to have enough cold air with this first storm system for some potential wintry mischief here. And you can see that the models, or at least the GFS, has been very consistent on a pretty significant icing event into the Philadelphia area, back through Harrisburg, up towards Scranton, maybe even down as far south as Baltimore, DC. That might be cutting it a little bit close. It might be a little further south than what I buy. But the model's been very consistent on that. And then a nice little snow event through portions of Michigan and into the Northeast here, where the storm finally cranks up as more of a nor'easter Miller B type event here along the coast. This would be Thursday morning. You can kind of see what's happening on this model, that transfer of energy from the apps to the coastline, and that would produce more of a snowstorm into the interior with that icing potential further south towards Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, and then probably all rain for the Jersey Shore, and then it may start as ice and then transition to rain for places like the Delmarva, even the DMV, I think would be a kind of reasonable solution here. But either way, a pretty high impact storm out of the GFS with the first one. And then we get a little bit of a lull by, this is Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Saturday morning. But then Saturday afternoon comes the next storm beginning. And notice this one, even I would say a bigger deal than the first one, a nice swath of snow setting up here through the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley, about the same latitude, honestly, as the first one on this GFS run. But check it out. This one becomes a pretty good little nor'easter for our folks in the Northeast. Places like Boston, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I know I've got a lot of viewers in Connecticut who are wondering where their snow is. Well, I'll tell you, the next 10 to 15 days is easily the best pattern you've had all winter for snow. So don't lose hope yet. Again, maybe listen to the groundhog down in Punxsutawney. He might be onto something with this kind of winter forecast. You see that snow. This would be kind of overnight Saturday into Super Bowl Sunday morning, and then potentially another storm brewing behind that one. That's the GFS. What about the European? Well, let's take a look at it and kind of give you the latest and greatest data here. So this is starting with the same first storm Wednesday morning. You can see that warm front producing some of that ice. Here's the big difference, and continues to be a difference. The European much further north with the first storm, and I'll tell you right off the bat, I buy this more than the GFS. I think this is going to be a progression type event where the first storm is really more of kind of this region that I have circled, and then the second storm is going to be more of this region that I have circled, and then potentially a third and fourth storm could be more of this region that I have circled. So you kind of see that progression southward, and I know I basically just drew the Olympic rings on your map. That's what it looks like, or a deformed version of it at least. But I think that's going to be the most likely transition here. So this is the European. This is more realistic, I think, a further north track. This would mean more rain for the Ohio Valley, more rain for the Delmarva, Philadelphia, but still showing ice and snow up through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, even into the interior Northeast, inside or interior from I-95 is the point I was trying to get to there, including Scranton, Binghamton, Boston, kind of a snow to ice to rain mess event, and then even really a snow to ice to rain event really through much of the Northeast with the first storm. Then comes the second storm, again a little bit of a lull by Friday, so it should be pretty good if you have any kind of Friday plans, even maybe Saturday depending on where you live. If you're in the Northeast, should be fine Saturday. But here comes the next big storm, kind of the same areas through the Midwest, the Great Lakes, getting it good. But then this one, a little bit better. Still kind of cuts inland on the European, and I know you're thinking, well, this is not fun for me if I'm in Connecticut, Rhode Island, where's my snow? But we'll see. This one, again, could transition back to the coast. And then after that, the pattern stays favorable. So again, if the first storm misses you, don't be surprised. Even if the second storm misses you, I wouldn't be too surprised. But by the time we get to the third, the fourth storm, I mean, your chances are probably going to increase more and more. If you're along the I-95 corridor for snow or ice or some sort of winter weather, it might take a couple storms to get that cold air far enough south, but don't lose hope completely if you're in the interior Northeast, and you could just get walloped by all of them, honestly, in a wintry fashion. So let's take a look at potential totals. This is just the first storm. This is not the weekend storm. We'll talk about that one in a second. But just the kind of Wednesday, Thursday time frame. This is the ice forecast from the GFS, and you notice a little bit further south here. Let me pick a color that might show up a little bit better. Down into Ohio, and then right into the DMV and the Delmarva. Showing big ice totals here in the GFS. We're talking near half an inch in places. That would be a notable ice storm. But what about the other models? The Canadian model further north with its ice shield, and then the European pretty similar to the Canadian. So the GFS, I think, is a little bit of an outlier right now. We'll watch it, see if maybe it's onto something. But I think this is a more realistic ice map, with the worst of it being into kind of southern Michigan, Illinois, maybe the Chicago area, an area we haven't talked a lot about, and then back down into the Alleghenies and up through New York State. I think that's the more realistic place to see some ice out of the first storm. What about snow? Well, here's the GFS model for snow, most of it being up here into Wisconsin, Michigan, and then the interior Northeast, specifically the higher terrains of the interior. That's probably about right. The European agrees pretty good with that sentiment. So you can kind of pause the video here and compare them. The Canadian here below, just to show it to you, to say I did. And then I'll even show you the icon. And then this last one is the UK Met. So most of them are in agreement. The interior Northeast can have the best shot of snow. And by the way, this is including this little clipper we're getting this weekend. So some of the snow along I-95 is really going to be from the clipper tonight that is working on through. So most of it, though, going to be in an interior Northeast event with the first storm. The second one, jury's still out. And then we're thinking, what about storm 3 and 4 that you were telling me about? Well, here's the setup for that one. And this is what I'm a lot more excited about for potential I-95 to even the Mid-Atlantic, potentially portions of the Southeast. kind of winter chances as we go towards the middle of February. So here's the setup. This is the Wednesday time frame. Basically, what's happening, why we're struggling to get any significant winter storm in the Northeast, is this. We've got a huge ridge building in as the storm is moving in. So yeah, we've got shallow cold air at the surface that could lead to some icing, but this is really a snow eater kind of pattern, if you will, with this big ridge. In fact, it's going to feel like spring down into the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, back through Texas. Full-blown spring fever this week. You'll notice though, and this is the European ensembles, if I didn't mention it, the date above my head, so you see February 6th here. Watch what happens. So this is after the first storm. By the time we get to Friday, some of that blue starts sneaking south a little bit further into the Northeast. And then the second storm moves through and you see, all right, still kind of red. That's not great for snow lovers. But then we get towards right around 10, 15 days out from now. Look what happens, especially right here. It's still not great around day 10. And I know you're screaming at the phone or computer, whatever you're watching on. And you're saying, Gerald, where's the snow? Where's this pattern? Here is the good part, I think. And granted, this is far out there. This is 10, 15 days away. But I'm pretty bought into this pattern. The teleconnections and everything kind of leading into it suggests we're going to flip back to a negative NAO, and that would support potentially, I don't want to say definitely, but potentially even a piece of the polar vortex breaking back off and moving into the southeast. And this would even be with kind of a blocking pattern that would support more of a kind of classic Miller A nor'easter track. Now, is that what's going to happen? I don't know. Jury's still out. Obviously, it's 10 days away. But what I will say is it's more favored than maybe it has been, I guess is the best way to put it. And obviously, it's the weather, so you never say never or never say an absolute at 10, 15 days out. But it's a pretty good look. And let's look at it on the models. So this is storm number 1. Again, we talked about Wednesday, Thursday. This is the European model. There's a big old mess. Either way, a big storm for someone. Weekend storm is here. This is the Super Bowl storm is what I'm calling this one, even though it's really the night before the Super Bowl probably for most folks. But Super Bowl weekend storm looks pretty similar to the first storm on the European. And then that cold air starts moving south a little bit and we get another piece of energy. Check this out. This is right at about 10 days from now. So this starts getting into more of the interesting range. Once you get within 10 days in the European, trusted model starts showing exciting things like this. You start to listen a little bit more and check this out. A nice snowstorm for the mid-Atlantic, the southeast even, and then turns into a nice little nor'easter. Now dies off a little bit, sure, but the track is there. And then you go even further ahead into time and it's just the storm train continues. So do not lose hope. If the first 2 storms, if you're living in maybe coastal New Jersey or Long Island or something, the first 2 storms don't get you, I think really much of the month is going to stay favorable. Now, here's some ensembles. This is the chance of significant ice from the European ensembles. Storm number 1, kind of what we saw on the European map there, highest chances in those brighter colors. Then comes storm number 2, could also bring an icing threat into the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, at least the northern Ohio Valley into the Great Lakes. And then storm number 3 signal, check this one out. This gets an ice signal all the way down into the Carolinas, up into the Northeast. And obviously we don't want to deal with ice, but that's at least a sign that winter weather is going to be in the east at that time frame. Again, this would be, we'll say, from around the 10th through the 15th or even the 20th of February. See the ice signal hanging on for a while. Then you look at the snow signal. Here's the first signal for Wednesday. Again, a little bit further north, even up into Ontario, Quebec, portions of Canada. Likely to get some good snow out of that one. And then the second storm signal does come south some on the ensemble. So that's something to note here. The operational European did not look very good. You look at the ensemble, so that's a good bullseye right through Boston, back into the Hudson Valley, into Scranton, even Connecticut, Rhode Island. So, not all hope is lost with the second storm either. The GFS shows a big storm. Even the Euro ensembles look pretty good for you folks out that way. And then here comes the third storm signal. Check this one out. A classic I-95 look for some snow out of the ensembles there, and it just keeps on going, folks. So even if you don't see a perfect storm on the models right now, the pattern is ripe for something. And here's one of the reasons why, and also kind of the temperatures here is going to be important for folks who maybe aren't seeing the snow and want to know what's coming their way. So this is this afternoon. You see that big heat dome building in the heart of the country. As we go through this week ahead, the first kind of shot or 2 of cold air are going to beat it down a little bit. So it's going to get cold in the Northeast, going to be cold in the Pacific Northwest, going to be about average to slightly below average Ohio Valley northbound. But south of there, this is Wednesday afternoon and evening, we're talking temperatures 20 to 30 degrees above what they should be this time of year. Maybe a little bit of cold air damming could mess with some things down here in the mid-Atlantic, but you get back towards Texas, Oklahoma, the mid-South, it looks very warm, full-blown spring fever like I mentioned. And then that tries to kind of fight back a little bit by Thursday, Friday. Then comes the weekend storm. This kind of line of cold and warm weather gets beaten down south a little bit. And by the long range, check it out on the European. Yeah, this polar vortex-like air mass wants to really lock itself in. By the time we get to the middle of the month, we could be full-blown below average once more through really everywhere east of the Rockies. And that's what I'll be keeping you up to date on. Alrighty, folks, I will go ahead and mention again, if you haven't already and you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like it, subscribe, and hit that bell for the latest notifications. With that said, though, y'all have a great rest of your day. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.